So, da unten haben wir noch was. Und das war's hier.
The perpetrator stood nearby, unfazed, like nothing was wrong. My dad is dead, and he's never coming back, Rachel. I can tell you these stories, but I can never reminisce with him again. He can never hold a grandchild that we'll probably never be able to have. I can never talk to him again, and I'll never be able to say I'm sorry. For everything.
Okay, jetzt ein paar da. Der Wolf.
It was really important to me that the wolf in this story that takes the fox's cubs, that it wasn't explained at all. Like, it's just this entity that's in the background. And of course it's supposed to represent something bigger than a wolf or even the fox. It's supposed to represent like the specter of death, and it comes when you least expect it. There's no justification. He's just there, always watching.
Immer ist ein Wolf. Oh, Grenzhaut. Nein. Nochmal umdrehen. Ja, ganz ehrlich, das Game ist so geil. Also wirklich. Ihr habt zuerst gesagt, dass das Game gut ist, aber beim Wolf habe ich schon ein bisschen Gänsehaut gekriegt. Also wirklich, der ganze Rücken war Gänsehaut. Natürlich verstehe ich nur die Hälfte, weil den Commentary vom Spielentwickler ist ja komplett nur auf Englisch ohne Untertitel. Und da verstehe ich nur die Hälfte. Aber wenn du das auch noch verstehst, ist das Game einfach nur... Du tauchst einfach in eine Welt ein und erlebst seine Geschichte. Und das... Wirklich, das muss ein Game wirklich auszeichnen. Und von der ersten Spielminute hat man ja auch mir angesehen, er war komplett dabei. Also wirklich komplett dabei. Und nur so, ganz ehrlich, das ist so dieser Punkt, warum ich Videospiele spiele. Und auch, warum ich einfach dieses Let's Play mache oder auf YouTube das mache oder hochlade, mich selber dabei aufnehme. Weil es gibt Spiele, die ich mir nur mal angucke. Ich glaube, das ist so ein Game, wo ich dann arbeite und nebenbei das am Laufen habe.
I need to go to bed. I just can't talk about this anymore. Good night.
Gute Nacht. Ja, und das ist für dieses Let's Play. Das ist auch eins dieser Let's Plays, die ich wirklich genieße. Natürlich will ich alles mitnehmen. Will ich alles erforschen. Will diese Dinge einsammeln. Will mir die Geschichten anhören. Aber jetzt wissen wir, dass sein Vater gestorben ist. Und das ist auch was ich auch letztens gesagt habe. Man sieht wirklich erst zu spät, was die Eltern für einen gemacht haben. Also ich kann von tiefster Brust sagen, ich hatte eine gute Kindheit und ich bin auch dankbar bei meinen Eltern. Ob das mein Vater ist, ob das meine Mutter ist, bin echt dankbar. Hä? Da sind wir runtergegangen, okay. Und wenn ich später Kinder habe, sollen sie auch dieses Gefühl haben. Also dieses Gefühl haben so, meine Eltern haben wirklich das Beste gegeben, was natürlich in ihrer Macht besteht und dann natürlich nicht überschuldet oder nicht verschuldet oder über die Verhältnisse gelebt oder mit besten oder nicht im besten Wissen gelebt, sondern einfach gesagt haben, ey, du bist ein Teil unserer Familie, wir beschützen wir geben dir Wurzeln und wir geben dir auch noch Flügel, dass du noch weiter träumen kannst, dass du weiter leben kannst. Und ich weiß auch, das hört sich jetzt doof an, aber ist leider so. Ich weiß, wenn es mir schlecht geht, weiß ich, dass meine Eltern immer für mich da sind. Immer. Ob es nur ein Rat ist, ob es finanziell gesehen ist, dass ich sage, okay, ich habe mich erst für eine kurze Zeit verschuldet. Die würden mir immer aus der Patsche helfen. Immer. Und das machten wirklich die Eltern aus sich. Ihr kennt Familien, da ist es nicht so. Also sind die glücklich, dass sie aus dem Elternhaus ausgezogen sind. Und nur so die ihre Pflichtsachen machen, so Weihnachten, Geburtstag und so. Aber ich bin glücklich. Mit meinen Eltern. Und jetzt sind wir, ich glaube, in seine Träume.
Joseph, you can't go to sleep feeling like this. I'm sorry for everything, and I know you need space, but I'm here for you. You don't need to feel so lost. Joseph, have I ever told you what my mother was like?
Hello, my name is Elise Whaley, and I was the voice actress for Rachel. I'm also David's wife. so that was convenient for working together. I was actually the voice actress for his first game, Home is Where One Starts, and I guess that I did a good enough job that David wanted me back, so I did the voice acting for this one as well. David definitely coached me through it because I'm pretty inexperienced when it comes to that. Home is Where One Starts was my first time ever doing voice acting of any kind. And we watched a lot of trailers of movies we liked to get the voice right of female leads who were talking in the trailer and try to mimic that and bring that into the game. So that had the right kind of feel and the right kind of atmosphere for the voice. My character actually is the same character from Home is Where One Starts. If you've played that game, you probably connected that together. And this is her probably about 15 years later, maybe 20 years later in this game. I was happy to revisit the character of Rachel. We kind of leave her in an ambiguous spot in Home is Where One Starts. It definitely ends on a hopeful note, but there's not a lot of details. And in this game, you see that she's able to move on through a lot of her issues that she had from her abusive home and be able to start her own family and start a new cycle without that abuse, which I think is really inspiring.
Also Rachel ist seine Frau und er erzählt seiner Frau die Geschichte, seine Geschichte mit seinem Dad. Wow. Das ist wirklich krass.
You know what it's like not to have a mom at home. And you know how hard that made my childhood. What helped me was watching the birds in the morning before the school bus came. I thought that my mother was one of those birds, and it made me want to be free like her. My mom taught me how to fold origami cranes while she was in the hospital. So I told myself I would fold one every day until I could fly myself.
Ja, ich nehme lieber das. Den Dialog mit.
So it's always interesting working with your spouse because, especially on a creative project, because they want your feedback, but it's something that's also dear to their heart, and they're dear to your heart, and you definitely don't want to hurt their feelings. So I was a little nervous when David asked me, he had finally finished writing the script, and he asked me to go over it and see what I thought. And I had minored in English. I majored in art, but I minored in English, so I felt like I had a little bit of experience. But I was definitely like a little scared because you don't want to be too harsh, but you also want to be honest. And it was the biggest relief when I read the script, and I was like, oh, good. My husband's a good writer. I don't have to change that much about this, just a few like grammatical things. And that was just like the biggest relief for me because it can be a tricky balance working with your spouse and making sure that that honesty is there, but also that love and the support is there as well.
So, jetzt die nächste Geschichte. Und ihr?
I think we both have always loved animals, and for me that love started with a dog. Sometimes this Rottweiler would come up to our property line and wait at the fence for me, but only once in a while. I was sure to check every day immediately after school, and it usually ended in disappointment. I would even steal money from my passed-out dad just so I could buy these off-brand dog biscuits. Even when she did stop by, she never went beyond the fence. Why was she so scared? I think my dad was the opposite of your dad in almost every way, except he was in the military as well. He coped with alcohol of every kind. The trailer started falling apart, he got angry, and I withdrew. More and more I became the weird, quiet kid who made lots of origami birds and carried dog biscuits around. I think we were pretty similar when it came to being the weird kids. And that same sincerity in college was one of the reasons I was so drawn to you.
Also sie hatte auch keine glückliche oder keine einfache Kindheit. Ihre Mutter war so das Segen, aber der Vater war so keine schöne Kindheit.
Life got worse and worse. And at one point, I really didn't think I could survive another day with my soul still intact. I had no real friends, let alone neighbors, since we lived in the middle of nowhere. I should have talked to my teacher, but I was scared what he would do if he found out. As I waited for the school bus one morning, I walked around until I found something in an abandoned shed. Something I can't put into words.
So we're talking about home is where one starts a lot. So if you haven't played that game, maybe this doesn't make as much sense, or maybe this is a little plug that you should go play it. But in that game, it actually features one of my artworks. I work as an artist and paper cutting, actually. And David used one of my artworks as a graffitied stencil in Home is Where One Starts that's against the wall of this shack. And it actually shows up again in the first tree, just a fragment of it. The first tree, the title actually comes from one of my artworks that I made back in 2015, I want to say. And I made this artwork while I was pregnant with our first child. And it had a lot of meaning for me, and David actually helped me come up with the title. And he asked, because I was really struggling, I was like, I have no idea what to call this, and I always go to David for title ideas and to bounce ideas off of him, and that's like the only way I can ever come up with a title is by talking with him. So we were talking back and forth and looking at this artwork, and he said, well, what kind of like movies or shows were you watching while you were making the artwork? Because my work's pretty tedious, so sometimes I'll watch a show or do some Netflix binging while I'm creating it. And I was like, oh, I actually watched Tree of Life a ton. And then we're like, Tree of Life. And we started thinking more about that and then arrived at the first tree. So it started off as one of my artworks and then became a part of David's art, which I think is really cool that we were able to share that title.
Man merkt wirklich, dass in dieses Game sehr, sehr viel Liebe reingesteckt wurde.
I summoned courage I didn't know I had, and I broke into my dad's room and found the key to the shed where he had locked my bike. I'll never forget that feeling. The wind rushing by my ears as the sun rose over fields of wheat. I was flying for the first time. I biked as far as my legs could take me until I found a house that felt friendly, and that felt like home. Those strangers helped me in so many ways. And if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have found my foster family. And if it wasn't for my parents, I wouldn't have met you.
Okay. Also ihre Mutter ist gestorben. Die ist bei ihrem Vater groß geworden. Und der Vater war einfach ein Arschloch. Und dann hat sie Leute kennengelernt bei der Fahrradtour. Und die haben sie geholfen, dass sie ihre Pflegefamilie
You have strength, Joseph, and you're not as alone as you think.
It's all just so pointless. Just waiting for life to happen. It's like having the home I always wanted is cursed out of my reach. The thought of being a parent myself. How could I do that when I couldn't even be a good son? I'm sorry. I know what you're saying. I just don't know how things will work out. These quiet hours will turn into years. We'll wonder which roads passed us by.
Then we'll forge a new road together. Besides, I discovered for myself that one fateful morning where any hopeful road leads to. There may be thorns and mist, but it always leads to the same thing.
And what's that?
Family.
I'm so glad that you're part of my family, Rachel.
And I'm glad you're part of mine.
merkt wirklich die Liebe.
question I get a lot is why a fox? And it ties into just how important family is for me. And Fox is actually a family name from my wife's side, from Elise. And she always heard about the legacy of the Fox family. And because of that, growing up, it was her favorite animal. She even made these 2 wooden foxes for our wedding cake toppers. So I thought it would be cool to have that animal in the game while these 2 people are having this conversation in the middle of the night.
Da ist was. Die Medaillen. Das ist der Panzer. Und irgendwie ein Bild. Kühlschrank und Fenster. Und die Waschmaschine. Mit einer Mikrowelle? Ja. Mit einer Mikro. Das Game ist eigentlich wirklich sehr, sehr schön. Also gerade habe ich gesehen, ja, man hat besser schon gesehen. Hase. Der Fuchs sieht echt schön aus. Das ist der Militär. Der Hirsch. Ein Fuchs. Es ist wirklich schön. Es ist wirklich schön. Ich finde aber das Bild. Ah, das ja. Finde ich voll cool. Das finde ich echt cool. Das ist so dieses, keine Ahnung, irgendwie das, da bin ich das mehr so dieses, hört sich jetzt scheiße an, aber mehr dieses Artbild, aber von Fuchs. So dieses, nur der Fuchs. Nur seine Form. Keine Farbe, nichts. Und das finde ich echt schön. Also, aber die Seite fertig. Dann gehen wir noch nach rechts. Nee, links. Wir waren eben gerade rechts. So, das ist das Tape, was wir uns schon angehört haben. Ein Fuchs. Ich glaube, wir müssen da nur geradeaus gehen. Aber die Musik haben sie echt schön gemacht. Eigentlich haben sie alles schön gemacht. Es ist sehr, sehr einfach gezeichnet. Also Grafik, wie gesagt, Grafik gesehen. Das ist keine Bombe. Ich glaube, das wollten die auch nicht. So, hier ist das Ende des Let's Plays. Im nächsten Part geht es weiter. Und ja, wenn ihr es noch nicht gehabt habt und noch nicht gemacht habt, dann besucht mich einfach bei Twitch, lasst mir ein Follow da, dann bekommt ihr eine Benachrichtigung, wenn ich wieder live gehe. Und wir sehen uns im nächsten Let's Play. Bis dann, ciao, ciao!